is Mallory Dansereau, and I am one of the proprietresses from Sycamore Spring Clothier, a small retail shop. We make 18th century and early 19th century clothing for reenactors. We go to events and we sell our wares and do demonstrations all over the Midwest and eastern part of the country. And one of the things that I get asked more often than anything else in this line of business is, how do you get dressed? So today I have some help from some lovely models and dear friends of mine. We're going to show you how you get dressed in 18th century clothing. We are also sporting a variety of different shapes that you see throughout the decades of the 18th century. So ladies, ready?
Ready.
It's quite cold. Pardon our state of undress. I shouldn't have thrown that on the ground. So, you'll notice we all look fairly similar. We have some different shapes, but base layer for women's clothing in the 18th century, or what is on your body at the lowest point, are stockings. I always recommend putting those on before your stays. If you do it after, you have to have much assistance.
I put on my shoes for that reason.
Shoes are also a good addition. Mine are not with me at the moment, and I thought I'd show you. I have silk stockings on. You could also wear cotton. You find a lot of people who sell stockings all across for reenactors, and I have had good luck with all the ones that I've purchased, particularly from Delp Stockings. Anyway, next we have stays. They were not called corsets until the 19th century. Marie Antoinette was actually the first one to have stays made in the corseting way, and then they became corsets, which are what you think of more for Civil War and Victorian, which are very shape changing. These are actually, the look you're going for is very conical, think ice cream cone look. So they move things, but they don't necessarily squish quite in the way an hourglass corset would. And then we have whatever shapewear you want for the shape that you're going for. Miss Jacqueline here is sporting peignets, or side baskets as the English called them, which were worn in the earlier part of the 17th century, and by earlier I mean like 1740s, 50s. This style died off as daily fashionable wear, but they stayed through about the end of the 18th century, so 1780s, 90s, to be worn under sackbacks and other gowns for formal events. Then we have Mistress Allison over here, who is wearing a bum roll. And this bum roll is nice, it's very shapely, and comes around over the hips. This was a popular style, think 1760s, 70s. It went later, more Revolutionary War era. This is pre-Rev War. And then it just gives her a lovely shape, and I can't wait to see what that looks like with a petticoat on. And then I am sporting a rump pad, which is a look that was very popular in the end of the 18th century as things got smaller. So mid-century and Revolutionary War era, women had these little tiny waists and these big hips, or these big bums. By the end of the century, things are getting smaller for the shapewear underneath, and by 1790s, when it's transitioning to Regency era, and then during the Regency, early part of the Regency era, you see just small little back pads that look very similar to a rump pad, but moved up underneath the waistline of gowns, which moved from the natural waist to underbust, leading to the Empire style of the Regency era. So, Mistress Allison, because it's cold and we need to get dressed, would you pass us our petticoats, please?
We have one petticoat.
Petticoat. And I'm going to say while she's passing these out, you'll notice mine are not like this because I'm a special snowflake, but Allison and Jacqueline have their undergarments, under structural pieces, tied underneath their corsetry. This is because it helps alleviate the rumples that I'm going to get, and I will point that out with mine so you can see the difference in what it looks like when it's finally put on. I was also going to say, the reason ours have hook and eyes, that it's not actually period correct. You would either have front lacing stays or solid front stays, like Miss Jacqueline over here. And this is a modern adaptation that we do when I go to shows and I'm by myself and I have to get dressed very quickly. It is easier for me to do hook and eye than it is for me to do front lacing. So that is not historically accurate. I want to let you know that. So now we're going to put on our petticoats. Petticoats are rectangular pieces of fabric that are stitched together and pleated to a waistband, and you're going to step into your petticoat. Ooh.
And I'm actually going to put my pocket on
Oh,
first.
yes. Allison, so Jacqueline has pockets built into her peignets. Not all peignets that you purchase in modern times have this. Ours have bottoms so that they can be served as buckets or baskets or pockets, whatever you like to call them. But they were oftentimes built so they had a bottom underneath, and that's part of the reason they were called side baskets by the English. And so you're going to put your petticoat on. She has a pocket. I decided I don't want a pocket today, which is why I do not have one. And you're going to tie the back portion of your petticoat around to the front. And ladies, don't forget to tuck it under your corset.
Oh, yes.
See, I'm already getting a bulk of ribbon if I don't do this. When it lays underneath the reed of the corset, it allows it to lay flat, and you get these nice clean lines that you're looking for. And I actually am going to space where those bows go. And then the front lifts up and ties around the back, and you just tuck the ties into the back part of the petticoat. They were done like this because fabric was very expensive in the 18th century, and it was easier to, there are lots of theories as to why this is. You do see fitted waistbands, particularly for women who were wealthier. They would have a fitted waistband that they could just tie to the sides together, but a lot of the time it would tie back to front, front to back, so that as you're expanding for having children or aging and you gain or lose weight, you have the opportunity to continue to wear your petticoat no matter what size you are. And that allows for just the changes that life has, and then you don't have to spend money making new petticoats. Petticoats, you would often wear multiple. For this demonstration, we each are only grabbing one for speed's sake. And but you would have multiple layers of petticoats. They'd be shorter underneath to make sure that no one sees your underneath petticoat, unless you're going for something stylistically where you want to have one petticoat turned up. I have seen that in portraits. So we have our petticoats on. Everyone looks very nice. And you'll notice Miss Allison has this lovely bum, and the fabric, the pleats or gathers around the waistband. All of ours have pleats, but they allow for the fabric to go all the way around. If you wanted to, you can see in a lot of original pieces, particularly with the peignets, petticoats are shaped so that they can come out over the side. It just kind of depends on look you're going for, formality of the event, and whether or not you want to be able to reuse that petticoat. Jacqueline does not have an abundance of money, so she has a petticoat that is wearable with or without peignets. And this goes nicely, turned sideways for me, and she's very, very wide, but very, very narrow. And then I just have this little tiny rump.
And this is also much too long of a petticoat for me.
Oh yes, actually, great point. Petticoats of the time were often ankle length. They have lots of jokes about not being able to show your ankles or your elbows, which is partially true, but you do have a stocking that would cover it.
So this would be about here for the hemline.
Because fabric was so expensive, you couldn't afford, unless it were for a formal ball, to have a gown that went all the way to the floor. Because if it's a petticoat or a gown that you're going to wear frequently and not just at a ball or a gala, you need it to not drag in the dirt. And washing was not something that you did very often. You would wash your shifts. You would also, everyone would have multiple shifts for the most part. But you'd have, depending on your class, you could have as few as 2 or as many as a dozen. And it just kind of depended on how wealthy you were to be able to splurge on something like this. All right, tops. So, Miss Jacqueline, she is putting on a pin layer that has a stomacher across the front. These were very popular in the mid part of the 17th century. And this is a larger print, which is something that shows what time period it is. The larger the pattern, the earlier in the 18th century that it would have been, 1700s. And then the patterns get smaller and smaller as the years go up.
Do those ones have ties in the back as well?
This one does. So sack backs and pin layers have beautiful pleating in the back that shows off wealth. It is a fashion that was introduced in France, and it was worn at court by Marie Antoinette. And this was, instead of pleating something to the back like a normal gown or jacket, you have all the excess fabric uncut and just wasted in this garment. And it's a show of wealth and formality. And this actually has ties in the back, so she could tighten or loosen based on what she's wearing it for, her current state in life, and adjust for size that way. Thank you, my dear.
Mm-hmm.
And then this has box pleats on the side to accommodate the panniers that complete that look. Go ahead. Do you need a hand? You might also
Potentially.
have a stomacher with yours.
I do.
Sweet.
Ooh, mine's reversible.
Yes. Alright, so Miss Allison is wearing a jacket that has a beautiful peplum. Actually, if you want to turn to the back, I'll help you pin. Has a beautiful peplum across the back that is longer. It has, this jacket could be representative of anything from mid 18th century to a little bit later. There are some fudging in extant examples of, kind of like today, you'll walk down the street and see a woman who looks like she's fresh out of the 1980s. It could be 1790 and you walk down the street and see someone fresh out of the 1780s. So people hung on to what they liked. There are portraits of, in the Regency era, of older women who are still wearing their peignets because that's just what they feel comfortable in. These shapes were what women were accustomed to for decades, and then when they had to change to, especially very drastic, going from this to the very conical, narrow of the Regency, some people just clung to the look of the 18th century over accepting the 19th century. So you see that a lot. There's fashion for fashion's sake, but there's also, man, I just like this outfit. If you will turn, my dear, Miss Allie is finished pinning, and she has pinned the jacket, there, thank you, to a stomacher again, and everything is pinned in the 18th century for women, or almost everything. The only time you really see buttons on garments is if it's a gown that is mimicking men's clothing. Men's buttons were expensive, they were a lot of work, and women expanded sizes, so pins were an easier and cheaper option. My own opinion, I think that they also were known for taking apart clothing and reusing the fabric, and it's harder to do when there are buttons and buttonholes. So that's kind of just a theory of my own for practicality's sake, but I don't have any historical found basis for that in particular. It's kind of a mystery of the clothing as to why did women do this. So I am putting on a jacket over my rum pad that is similarly peplumed to Allie's, only it is a bit shorter, and it does have hanging cuffs, which hanging cuffs tend to be an earlier pin.
Oh, there's one on the inside.
Oh,
There's
no,
a bunch
there-
on it. That's on your stomach.
That's my,
Okay.
yeah. Nope, there's one right there.
Very hazardous.
Aha.
Ah,
Pins.
it's a risk.
So it does have cuffs, which you see earlier, but I like, you would see a peplum like this later in the century with a rump pad, so that's why I pulled this particular garment. And then you overlap, right over left, left over right, just depends on your preference. I'm going to be honest, there are certain garments that go one way for my own personal collection and certain garments that go the other. It just depends on how the fabric wants to work, how the pattern matches up, if I care about that, that I do it that way. Thank you. And so, when you pin away from yourself. That way you are less likely to, like, say, eat and swipe your hands down over the pins. You get used to working with pins. It's not always, it does not start off as an art that you necessarily go without getting pin gouged. It's definitely a learning curve, but once you get used to it, I don't do it nearly as often as I used to do, aside from when I find a surprise pin that I dropped in my cuff. So, this has pinned all the way down the front, and what you're going for is the nice smooth lines over your stays. You want to have as few wrinkles as possible. This jacket that Allie has on is actually a little big for her, which is why she does have some wrinkling, but they were going for a very smooth shape here so that they could have a nice big full bottom, and it helped keep that look very clean and very sleek and very thinning to the waist, or trimming of the waist, whatever. But next, we're still a little bit risque with what we are wearing, and we need neck kerchiefs and caps. Now, there are people who refer to these, we did it for many years, who refer to these as fichus. They were not called fichus until the 19th century, but they were called neck kerchiefs in the 18th century. So you would wear a neck kerchief. You might need to unfold yours.
I have to.
Sorry.
Let's go.
And mine is rather large, so I'm going to keep it
Yes,
folded.
yours is large, so you'll keep it folded. They came in all shapes, sizes. You could have a ruffled one, and tuck it, I would say, for that one,
Look out.
tuck down the front of your stomacher.
There's a couple different ways I've seen these worn,
Yes. And you could wear them a variety of different ways. You could put it on first before the stomacher. You might have embellishment on your stomacher that you could pull it through. It just kind of depends on the outfit. For me, I'm going to actually take one of my pins from down here and overlap and pin this to my front. And you could have a decorative pin that does this, a bejeweled something, but this is a very important piece to women's clothing. It was a modesty kerchief, particularly during day wear and going about your evening or early evening if you were going to a formal supper or something and wearing a Watteau gown or sack back or some kind of silk fantastical and beautiful thing, you might not have a fichu on. And if you did, it could be very, very sheer, ruffly. Fichu. 18th century neck kerchief. Thank you. You might have a neck kerchief on. I told you, I learned it the wrong way. It's taken years to get away from that. So you might have a neck kerchief on to help keep what you're wearing modest, but it would be very sheer and elegant looking. And you might be just adorned with mini jewels and not have to worry about a neck kerchief. Just kind of depended on who they were and what they were wearing. And then,
Do these tuck into the back sometimes?
not very
Not
often.
very
In the 18th century, you see a lot that come to a lovely point down the back. You might have it tucked in depending on what is happening back here. So for Miss Jacqueline, she would tuck hers in to show off the extravagance of the Penton layer, which is what she's wearing. So when she does that, it is lovely and allows to show this, or she could have it center down the back. It just kind of depends on what look you're going for, but this was the most common way to see it worn.
And I think I've seen some of those get pinned in place
Yes.
and things like that around the back.
Particularly on a windy day, you want to stick a pin in the back. Again, you could do something fun with that, something decorative. Just kind of depends on how you want to wear your outfit, and there's no wrong answer for that. And then finally, there are lots of accoutrements and accessories that could be worn. This is just base daytime outfit for all of us. If we were walking about in the town, being tan is a very bad thing, so you would probably wear a bonnet in addition to mitts. But for base outfit in my home, this is what we would wear, and a proper lady would always have her head covered. So we all have our caps that that help protect our hair. We don't wash our hair very often, so it helps protect any bonnet that we might wear. And it is a modesty piece. In the evening, again, you might choose not to wear a cap and have large adorned hair with a sailboat in it, as Marie Antoinette once did, or beads and jewels. And those things for an evening setting actually count as a hair covering, as long as there's something in and adorning your hair that allows. There are some rules to fudge that modesty piece there, but during the day we were wandering about, we would need to have a cap. So this is our final bit on how to dress as an 18th century woman. Thank you so much for joining us. Doodles!